Hey everyone, Zach here, and welcome to Lesson 8 of this series, Learning C++ by Making Games. In this video, we'll go over what is flow control. This video has been brought to you by my Patreon sponsors like Nemian Games. In this video, we'll go over what statements are and flow and structure controls. So statements, well, you don't really need to worry about them as you've been using them already since the beginning of this series. A statement is just a command that tells the computer what to execute or what to do, and these statements are separated by our terminators, the semicolon. So for example, std cout guess a number is a statement, and when we read in the guessed number, that is also a statement. Likewise, when we declare our variables, we are making a statement. We're telling the computer, allocate space and memory for this variable. Statements come in two types. They can either be simple, one-line statements, as demonstrated here, or compound, otherwise known as block statements, which take up multiple lines. And the reason why we're talking about compound or block statements is we'll see them often when we have conditional statements we have to run. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, let's talk about what a procedural language is. And this is relatively simple. A procedural language is a language that executes code from top to bottom. The alternative to this is an object-oriented language. Now, a lot of people say C++ is an object-oriented language. It's partially true. C++ is a hybrid language. It uses both procedural and object orientation. So if we're thinking about a procedural language, then this raises a question. What if we only want certain statements to be executed at certain points? Well, that's where control structures or flow control comes into place. Control is how we as programmers specify what statements we want the computer to run or execute. So under what circumstances and when. This literally controls the flow of what statements get executed. There are various types of flow control. I'll give examples of two and talk about four overall. So first we have the conditional structure, the if-else-if statement. So on the right, you can see we have an example of a simple statement. So if x is equal to 100, then display the value of x. Now, with a simple statement like that, you don't need brackets. It is good practice, however, to still use brackets. The next one, if x equals 100, so same condition, then we output the value of x. We go down a line and output that is a large number. And you notice this statement, or these statements, are in brackets. That's because that's a compound statement related to the condition above it. And we'll talk more about this in the next video. So outside of conditional structures, we have another method known as loops. And loops, for example, while or for loops, there are others, but those are the two you'll see most often, will run code repeatedly until a condition is no longer met or a condition changes. So if we say x is equal to 100 and then have the conditional check while x is greater than 0, so the while is the loop and the condition for the loop is that x has to be larger than 0. So this is going to run until x is 0. It will run what's in the curly brackets, so it'll print out x, a comma, and then it will remove 1 from x. So each time this runs, it'll print 100, remove 1 from x, it'll check is x still larger than 0, it's 99 at this point, so print 99, comma, remove 1 from 99 or remove 1 from x, it's now 98, 98 is still larger than 0, it'll print 98, comma, make it 97, until it gets down to 0. So when x is equal to 1, it'll print 1, take away a value of x, or take away 1 from x, so that's called decrementing x, by the way, or decrementing a variable, and x is now 0. We will fall out of this loop, and we will drop down to the line outside of the curly brackets. And so we'll have 100 to 1 printed on the screen, and then the word liftoff. So this is a while loop. A for loop we'll talk about a little bit more when we get into Hangman. Outside of conditional structures and loops, we have two other ones, and those are our jumps. So this is where we have a break. So if you see the word break, it's a keyword. It means, jump from whatever you're doing here to something else. A continue, which might resume a loop or might go on to a different piece of code within a loop. And go to, which causes the computer to go from the current statements being executed to other statements being executed. Now, there's no easy way to give examples of these at this point, so we'll cover these in more detail as we get into other aspects of our games. And finally, there is selective statements, and these are switches, and there are two types. There's an int switch and an enum switch. There are actually more than this, but these are the two main types. And they're very similar to if and else if conditional structures. The difference between a switch and a conditional structure is that a switch allows for multiple conditions, whereas a conditional structure, the if else if, is a Boolean value, true or false. A switch, you might have multiple states. So you might have state 1, 2, and 3. Whereas to do that with a conditional statement, you would need multiple conditional checks. And we'll get into both of these when we get into Hangman. The two we want to worry about for this series currently are our conditional structures and our loops. But that said, we've covered everything we need to cover in this video. In the next video, we'll get into a little bit more about the writing of these statements and the writing of flow control so that we can set up our while loop for our game. That said, if you've enjoyed this video, hit that like button down below. And if you want to be here when the other videos are released, make sure to hit that subscribe and notify icon. Also, consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. It really does help the channel out. You get access to the material early, you get access to completed projects or access to ongoing projects. You also get a say in what I cover on this channel. Alright, all of that said, as usual, I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.